Hello everyone and welcome back. As you can probably make out, I have actually switched from Paint to OneNote. This was mainly because a lot of you guys complained about me using Paint, which is an app that's over 10 years old and it doesn't have a lot of features. Well, Microsoft OneNote actually has a lot more features. I mean, to name a few, I can simply put down the XY axis whenever I want to, and I can also change what any text that I write to say for like words over here by clicking ink to text. So that's pretty convenient. And yeah, I mean I didn't type anything there, but you get the gist of it. So it's nice knowing that I have features like these, but knowing myself, I'll probably forget to use them. But yes, it's nice knowing that it has features like these, and also it's a lot more professional looking. It's much cleaner. I mean, it has to be expected because Paint is around more than 10 years old, and this is a relatively new app. So let's get back to what this video is actually about. This video will be discussing the Carnot engine. This here is a PV diagram representing the process that a Carnot engine consists of. So to write it down, the spelling is you can look in the top left corner, but I'll just write it down for myself, I guess. So okay, fine. Let's test this ink to text thing. All right. So let's see what I get. Okay, I'd probably read the R as N, so let me just change that there. So we'll be talking about the Carnot engine today. So let me just stretch it out like this, and I'll shift it over there because I'll get a lot more space. Okay, fine. All right. So the Carnot engine. Now the Carnot engine is just like any other engine in the fact that it takes in some heat from an external source, it converts some of that heat into work, and lets the rest of the heat out. Now why I say the rest of the heat out is because it has to follow the first law of thermodynamics, that is, I'll allow the Carnot engine to take in some Q1 amount of heat, then I'll allow it to do some work. So the rest of the heat that is being released has to follow the law of thermodynamics, that is second law, first law of thermodynamics. So this heat I'll let it be Q2. So I can say that the work that this Carnot engine does is actually Q1 minus Q2, and that is equal to the work done. And this is generally true for any engine. So what's special about the Carnot engine is that you cannot build an engine that is more efficient than the Carnot engine. In fact, this is what is called the Carlos Theorem, and the proof of this is actually quite interesting to look at. And in fact, I was originally planning to make a video just on that. I wasn't actually going to explain the Carnot engine, but then I realized that this in itself is a pretty significant topic, so I thought that I would cover this first and then I would move on to that. So, well, let's begin actually looking into the Carnot engine. So first I mentioned the efficiency. Now the efficiency of the engine can be simply written as eta. This is the symbol eta. Well, let me check if it recognizes it. Okay, wait, hold on, I didn't select the thing. Okay, yeah. So let me select this over here and let me see if it recognizes the letter eta. I mean ink to text here. Okay, it doesn't actually recognize it. Okay, fine. So let me write eta. This is the Greek letter eta is equal to work done by the original amount of heat taken in. So this is generally how efficiency is defined for anything. It's just the ratio of how much you get out to how much you put in. That is, I put in Q1 amount of heat, and so I'm looking at how much work that I've gotten out of it. So this is eta, and as you can see, we have a very simple relation over here. So you're going to put that into this equation, and so what you're going to get is Q1 minus Q2 by Q1. And this can further be written as 1 minus Q2 by Q1. So this is a really neat relation. This relation also has a much more empirical form, but before getting into that, I will actually be explaining this diagram, this whole thing, what it really means, and how do we actually evaluate the Carnot engine mathematically. Alright, so what we do is we're going to name these points 1, 2 and 3 with characteristic pressure, volume and temperature values. So this is going to be P1, V1, T1. This is going to be P2, V2 and T1. I'll ask you to ignore this over here and this also over here. Now, why I say that these 2 points are at the same temperature is because they are beside a heat reservoir. Alright, this up over here is a reservoir. And what actually happens is that while the engine is going under isothermal expansion, that is, it is expanding at the same temperature very slowly. What it's doing is it's taking in heat from this reservoir and is slowly expanding. But when it takes in heat, it is not necessary that there should also be a change in temperature. There is only a change in temperature when there is also a change in its internal energy, which is what we denote by delta U. So during an isothermal process, we say that delta U is equal to 0 since delta T is equal to 0. Alright, so we are going to say that these 2 points are at P1 V1 T1 and P2 V2 T1. However, when it moves from 2 to 3, it undergoes adiabatic expansion. Now, an adiabatic process is one in which there is no heat energy absorbed from the surroundings. So what we'll say is, we'll say Q is equal to 0. But since the engine has undergone expansion from the first law of thermodynamics, we also know that there must be a change in internal energy. And so, since Q is equal to 0, what we can write is work done is equal to minus delta U. Alright, and since we are considering the work done by the gas as positive, the delta U will be negative. That means that there will be a change in temperature to a lower quantity. So the temperature which I'm going to write T2 over here, that's going to be lesser than T1. Moreover, I'm going to also write P3, V3 and T2. That is the pressure, volume and temperature at point 3. Now again, as you can see, it undergoes an isothermal process. But over here, instead of the gas expanding, the gas is being compressed. That is, some work is being done on the gas. And over here, again, since it's an isothermal process, there will be no change in temperature. So the heat energy released by the gas will actually be equal to the work done on it. Moreover, as you can see, there's an adiabatic process back up. It's a compression. Again, since over here work done will be negative, so there will actually be an increase in delta U. So there will be, as it goes from 4 to 1, the temperature will increase back up to T1. Now I mentioned that there's a reservoir up here, but I can't find my mouse. Yeah, so I mentioned that there's a reservoir over here. That is, no matter how much heat energy you give it, it will not change. The temperature will not change for it. The temperature will remain constant. Similarly speaking, there is a sink over here. Alright. So this sink over here, no matter how much heat energy you give to it, its temperature will remain constant. So similarly speaking, since the temperature is over T2 over here, the temperature will also remain T2 over here, and I'm also going to write P4, V4 and T2. Alright, so I might not have done the best job of explaining it, but there are a lot of explanations out there on the internet if you need to look further into this, because this is actually a really interesting topic. Also on a higher level, there's also an explanation based on it in terms of entropy, which is something that you can look into. So that was an explanation of how the Carnot engine works. So just to recap, it takes in some energy from the surroundings, it undergoes expansion, then it doesn't take in energy, it quickly expands in order to reduce itself to a lower temperature such that it can give out heat at a lower temperature. Because if it gives out heat at a higher temperature, there's not going to be a lot of work done. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to give out heat at a lower temperature. So it goes to a low temperature by the means of adiabatic expansion. Then it compresses back very slowly in an isothermal compression, and then it goes back up to the point 1 using an adiabatic compression to get back to the point 1, and then the whole cycle keeps repeating at each time giving out a work over here. So that was a qualitative explanation of how the Carnot engine works. So, like I said earlier, there's actually a much more empirical relation for the efficiency, and that can actually be stated as 1 minus T2 by T1. Alright, so this is what we will be proving today. And there is another relation over here, and that is V3 by V4 is equal to V2 by V1. So this is yet another relation that I will be proving in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So let's begin. So something that I forgot to mention just before we dive into the maths. All these processes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4 to 1, these are all idealized processes. That is, they are not actually possible in real life. So what you can only do in real life are approximations of this. That is, you can never have a process that never changes in temperature as it moves from 1 to 2, or you can never have a process that doesn't takes in some heat from the environment. These are all completely idealized processes, and actually creating things like these are not possible. The reason as to why we study it because it helps us gain a deeper understanding of thermodynamics, by means of which we may actually be able to design better engines in real life. So let's begin with the maths actually right now. Alright, so we're going to say that there are n moles of the ideal gas that has been put within the engine, and we're going to use this n moles to produce some work out of it. So the first thing that we might think of doing is to calculate the total work that is done in this whole process here. So for this, we are going to use two important formulas, that is the work done during an isothermal process, and that is actually given by n r t into the natural logarithm natural logarithm of the final volume, that is, we're going to denote it by V final and by the initial volume. And we also have another expression, that is the work done during an adiabatic process, and this is what we write this as nRT. Oh, hold on, nr delta t. So I'm going to write t final minus t initial by 1 minus gamma. You can usually just write this as delta t, but here I'm writing this as t final minus t initial because it will prove useful later on to highlight what I'm going to do later. These results can actually be proved using the equation of states of the two processes. For an isothermal process, the equation of state is actually PV is a constant, alright, and for the adiabatic process, it is PV raised to gamma is a constant. So these proofs are fairly easy to do, so you can do them using as an exercise, I guess. And of course, you will be using dW is equal to PdV to evaluate these expressions if you want to do it as an exercise. So this is a story for another time, so we're going to just erase all of this over here. Okay, so we're going to try and evaluate the work done from the first process, that is isothermal expansion. So the symbol n will remain the same, so will the symbol R. Is the universal gas constant, and the temperature is actually going to be T1 throughout the process. So it's going to be T1, and we're going to write this as ln of V2 by V1. Okay, so the work done from 2 to 3 can be written as we're going to write nr, and the final temperature here is T2, so we're going to write T2 minus T1 by 1 minus gamma. Oh, and those of you who are unfamiliar with this, well, symbol gamma, it's actually the ratio of Cp by Cv, that is molar specific heat at constant pressure and molar specific heat at constant volume, and we call this gamma the adiabatic constant. Alright, so then work 3, 4 can be written as N R T 2 ln of V4 by V3, and lastly work done from 4 to 1 can be written as N R, and now it's not going to be T2 minus T1, it's going to be T1 minus T2. Alright, so that's why I said I'm going to write this like explicitly instead of just writing delta T. So T1 minus T2 by 1 minus gamma. So what happens when you add all of these to get the network? So I'm going to write work net over here. Okay, so that's just, you can write work 1, 2 plus work 2, 3 plus work 3, 4, but I'm just going to skip all of that. So I'm going to write this as NR T1 ln of V2 by V1, but I'm not going to write the work 2, 3 and work 4, 1, and that is because you can clearly see that when you take the minus on outside, these two expressions will be completely identical. Oh, sorry. So these two expressions will be completely identical. So these will actually get cut off. So all you need to do is, you can actually also write this as, so I'll just continue over here, plus NR T2 ln of V4 by V3. Alright, so this is the network done. And you can also write this as Q1 minus Q2. And why is that? Okay, so like I said, these two are isothermal processes, right? So the delta U for these processes is 0. So from the first law of thermodynamics, we have Q1 is equal to work 1 and Q2 is equal to work 2. But this is actually compression, right? So we actually have to include the negative sign here to indicate the fact that heat is being released over here. So work net is actually equal to Q1 minus Q2, which is something that we had gotten earlier by simply like looking at the figure. So, but from how do we actually get the temperature relation from all of this? So for that, we actually have to prove another result before we get into the efficiency. So let's begin with that. Now, for the next relation which I wrote earlier, so we have V3 by V4 is equal to V1 by V2. No, sorry, my bad, V2 by V1. Yeah. So the way we might think of tackling this is using the equation of state that we had earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the equation of state for each of these processes. Alright. So when I do that, I'll get P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. Okay. Then I'll also get P2 V2 raised to gamma, because that is actually an adiabatic process, is equal to P3 V3 raised to gamma. Then I'll get P3 V3 is equal to P4 V4. Okay. And finally P4 V4 raised to gamma is equal to P1 V1 raised to gamma. So when I get this, I'm going to multiply all of these together, and so let's look at what we get. So P1, P2, P3. I'm just going to write the pressures together because they will actually get cancelled, so I don't need to worry about them. P1, P2, P3, P4 into V1, V2 raised to gamma, then V3 and V4 raised to gamma. This is equal to P1, P2, P3, P4 into, well, first I'll write P2 over here. Oh wait, hold on, not P2, PV2 I meant V2. So I'm going to write V2, then V3 raised to gamma, V4 and V1 raised to, oh god, I've gone down. So V1 raised to gamma. So I'll just cut these pressures over here. Okay, and then what I'm going to write is, well, after evaluating all of that, what you're going to end up with V2 raised to gamma minus 1 into V4 raised to gamma minus 1 is equal to V1 raised to gamma minus 1 into V3 raised to gamma minus 1 Okay, and then you will oh god, you'll take the root, the gamma minus 1th root. So what you'll actually end up with is v2 v4 is equal to v1 v3, and simply cross multiply, and you, or I'll just bring it to the other side, you'll get v2 by v1 is equal to v3 by v4. Now this was not complicated, but it was, all you had to do was multiply all of these things, but it was tedious to look at. So what we're going to do now is we're going to substitute the v2 by v1 and v3 values in this expression here, and that's useful because then we can simply cut the natural logarithm. So let's do that. Actually, not in this expression right here, but actually into the expression for efficiency, right? So we had eta is equal to 1 minus q2 by q1. So this minus is actually taking into account the negative sign. So let's look at that now. So we have n r, this will be t2, right? And so I'm just going to write down over here n r t1 ln of v4 by v3 by, right, so I'm going to write a negative here to indicate the fact that heat is being released. So, and then so I can actually cut this negative and negative and make it positive over there, and I can write this as ln of v2 by v1. Okay, so I'll try to bring it over here to free space up, and also I'll cut this nr and r. So alright, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove a negative sign from the logarithm. Now remember that logarithms simply represent the power that an expression is raised to. So if this here is v4 by v3 raised to 1, and if I take a negative sign out, this will actually be equal to v4 by v3 raised to minus 1, and that is nothing but v3 by v4 raised to 1. So when I take the negative sign out, I'll actually have 1 minus, so yeah, this is supposed to be t. This is going to be t2 by t1 into ln, okay, I don't know why I started up there, into ln of v3 by v4 by t1 into ln of v2 by v1. And now you see why I spent time proving this result, because these two expressions in the logarithm are completely identical, right? So what I can do is simply cut this, and then I get a much more empirical relation that depends only on the temperatures of the reservoir and the sink, thus telling you how efficient the Carnot engine will be. And with this, I think we come to the end of the video. I think this is a lot. I think this is slightly longer than my usual video, but I guess this compensated for the shorter video last time. So the next video is going to be about proving how the efficiency of any engine that you design can never be greater than this value over here. So the engine that you have designed will either be the Carnot engine itself, that is, it is based on the same principles as the Carnot engine, or it will be breaking the law of thermodynamics. So I will see you there in the next video. That's all for now.